episode of the KateCast has some bad words. You should cover your ears.
Hi, I am Kate Danley, and welcome to the KateCast. What's the KateCast? I've lived in Los Angeles now for about 10 years, and over this time I've met some incredible people. People who are pursuing their dreams and doing amazing things, and no one has ever heard about them because they don't have these huge marketing machines behind them. So I thought maybe I would introduce them to you. My first guest is Danielle Stewart. She is an international stand-up comedian. She's got a YouTube series. It was called It's Just Sex. It was just her with a camera just talking frankly about sex, and it had 500,000 viewers every single episode. She has appeared on Chelsea lately. She is a regular at the Hollywood Improv. Her set is filthy and fantastic. So, sit back, relax, and meet Danielle Stewart.
Who am I gonna talk to today? What will I ask them and what will they say? What will they say? What will they say?
I am here with my very special guest, actress and comedian Danielle Stewart. Thanks so much for coming in, Danielle.
Thank you for having me on KateCast.
When did you start getting interested in comedy?
Oh, I'm not interested in comedy. I just do it. You know, I mean, I was Saturday Night Live when you're a kid, you know, I wanted to be, I didn't, when you're a kid, you don't know the delineation between, like, sketch comedy, character person, improv, stand-up, you know, I was just like, I just want to be funny. And then my dream sort of veered more towards, like, I wanted to be downtown with Julie Brown on MTV. She's always in the middle of the party. I was like, I want that. Of course, I wanted that. And then, you know, I don't know, like, and sometime in Boston, I started going to Nick's Comedy Club, which was a really great comedy club at the time. And I saw all of these, like, local guys, and I was just in awe of what they did. You know, every art form has its own scene. You know, like painters are, like, really deep or you know. Right. And the comedy scene really appealed to me. It's very grungy. It's very, like, blue collar, a lot of smoking, a lot of drinking, a lot of coffee, a lot of, you know, sleep till noon, up till 3, you know, that type of thing. There's a real, like, masculine energy to it that was just grungy, and I just fell in love with that. Wow. But I couldn't wrap my mind around, I didn't have, like, the right, you know, I never really seriously thought about, like, oh, could I be a comic or whatever. I mean, for me, I was just like, if I could just, like, hang out with comics and sleep with them or something, I would be cool. You know, like, that's really what I thought at 18. I was like, you know what, I just want to be around these people.
What was your childhood like?
My parents weren't happily married. They actually weren't technically married at all. But my dad and mom were, like, you know, a mismatched couple who, like, had kids and were trying to make it, you know, trying to do the best that they can. But in the meantime, it's like they're fighting, my mother's trying to make money, you know, we're not really getting a dual, loving, caring, supportive upbringing. Yeah. You know, my mother did a wonderful job for what was put on her plate, but there really wasn't, you know, there was a lack of nurturing. There was a lot of fighting and rage and chaos and criticism and stuff that went on in my house, you know, but most comics have that story and worse. And my whole, like, you know, I'm just like a, by default, an underachiever, so I was sort of like, I could still get all the things that I want out of this and not have to do all that work on writing and dealing with the nerves of getting on stage. Like, let me just hang out here and suck these guys' dicks. You know what I mean? That was my plan. You know, that didn't really happen, just to clarify. Yeah, and so then I, you know, I had a boyfriend in college who we were both in the theater program, and he encouraged me to do stand-up, and I did it. It's just, you have to want it really bad. And at that time, the only thing that I wanted really bad was drugs and alcohol. So that kind of took a back burner. You know?
Now, were your parents in the entertainment field?
My mother's an artist.
Okay.
She's a painter. Or she's any fine art. She's like got it down. She's makes clothes and is a painter and is a cook, and I mean, she's just like, anything she touches is like insanely perfect. My father's a musician.
Cool.
Plays all different kinds of instruments, sings. So yeah, they're both artists.
Now you said that you went to college. Where did you go to school?
UMass Boston.
Okay, cool.
Which is the one that no one knows about. It's a city college.
Were you a theater major?
Yes, but not because I was particularly interested in theater. I was interested in getting fucked up. So theater was the one thing where, you know, you could fuck around them. There's the most leeway for, like, you know, fucking around.
Did you do theater in high school, or was it just something that you woke up one day and said, oh, I'll major in this?
Doing stuff like sports and drama and stuff, and being in any kind of club, Amnesty International, you know, anything like that requires just an iota of, like, balls to, like, at least show up to the meeting. You know, like, I'd like to do this. I know I don't know anyone here in this room, but I'd like to do this. You know, I knew one person in my public school from a camp the summer before, and I just clung to her and did whatever she did. You know, I went to class for the first year. I went to class, and then I would go home or hang out with her at, like, KFC or something. And then I just stopped going to class entirely. And then, like, I had to go, you know, I had to deal with all of this, like, I skipped, like, 2 months of school. I mean, it was, you know, I was a truant kid. So, no, I graduated high school with, you know, really no direction, no interests. Somebody said something to me recently about, you know, everybody reacts differently to, like, different upbringings, I think. You know, there's people who have really bad upbringings and then, like, prevail or go to Harvard or whatever, and then there's people who have, like, even not as bad upbringings and end up, like, with a needle in their arm under a bridge. Yeah. So, but somebody said something to me recently where, like, if you grow up in a house where you feel like there isn't a family vibe, a lot of people tend to want to create their own family immediately. So I really relate to that because from, like, age 13 on, I just wanted to create my own family. You know, my family was my family and I had to deal with them, but I wanted to get my people, and we had our, you know, the things that we did together and create this thing. And, you know, unfortunately, / fortunately, because it made me who I am, I guess, but that was like skipping school, doing drugs, drinking, having sex, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, but that's what I did with my family, you know. Like, I remember everyone always told me, you're so funny, you should be a comedian, you should be a stand-up, you should be a stand-up. You know, I was very funny at parties and self-deprecating and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, when you're, like, have low self-esteem or no self-esteem and you are, you know, completely numbing yourself out with, like, drugs and alcohol, people could tell you, the Queen of England could come to you and be like, you know what, you're really special, and you'll be like, oh yeah, really? You know what I mean? Like, you don't, it just goes in one ear and out the other.
Right.
The only thing you hear is negative stuff. So people would always say that, and I was like, you know, okay. And I, you know, honestly, part of me was like, sure, you know, it'll figure itself out, you know, I'm sure I'll end up being a star. Like, I always thought, I was like, they'll figure it out. They'll find me. Hollywood will find me. Oh my God. But I think a lot of people do, like, even though they won't admit it, feel that way. They're like, they're sitting on their couch in Colorado going like, hey, Hollywood, why haven't you called? You should have called, like, a couple of years ago. The first year out of high school, I was like, fuck, I'm not going to college. I had a great job at Parade of Shoes. I was the assistant manager, not to drop names, but I was making a lot of money for me. You know, the minimum wage was like $4.50 or something, and I was making like $8.75 an hour. I mean, which was like, fuck you money. I'm not going to college and leave all this, you know? So things were good, and I was like, I had money to party, I moved into my own apartment, everything was great, and then I decided, like, I had some kind of a moment of clarity where I was like, I really need to go to college. Because if I don't go to college, I'm going to be assistant manager or maybe, you know, manager of a shoe store the rest of my life. Right. So I went to college, but it was like literally only as like a place mark till I found out like what my next gig was. Right. You know what I mean? Started out as an anthropology major and realized like that was too, I'm really interested in cultural anthropology. Really? Yeah. I just love it. So I started out with that, but that was like hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of the, like, Harvard and MIT and Tufts, all those professors moonlight as teachers at UMass.
Wow.
So the cool thing about it is you get these amazing teachers for, like, you know, $2,000 a semester. I mean, it was pretty incredible. So then I switched to economics, which is like, I mean, I've never passed a math class. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, I took a screenwriting class over, like, the winter break. They had, like, this, and I met this guy, and he just became my higher power. I mean, he was just, like, everything to me. I mean, he was, like, oh my God, he was, like, a playwright, and very well-read, and really into comedy, and handsome, and charismatic, and I was just, like, and I just followed him.
Yeah.
You know, I just followed him, and he opened my world up to stand-up comedy.
Okay.
He introduced me to David Sedaris, and, you know, David Ives, and Donald Pinter, and, like, you know, playwrights. And I'm sure I was taught them, but I just was like, and I just was like, and I, you know, he changed everything for me. And so then I was in the theater program because he was in the theater program.
Okay.
You know, and I didn't have any much interest in, or direction, or drive, or focus to explore being a writer, or being, you know, an actor, or anything like that.
Okay.
Like, that was like, oh, no, that's not for me. I was in costume, which I honestly do not recall doing a single costume the entire time I was there. So I'm not really... Then we broke up. That was very traumatizing for me. I just went crazy, and so I couldn't go back to school because I was, like, heartbroken, and so I started working in this bar, you know, and then I met a guy there who was moving to LA, and I was like, sure, why not, you know? I mean, this has been, like, you know, I'm such a, like, it's, I mean, looking back on it, it's like, I feel so bad for my mother. I mean, she must have been like, this is a lost cause. Like, I need to just delete her number and start over, because this is like it's a horrible kind of child to have, where you're, like, so willful and think you know, and you just see them throwing their life down the tube. So I ended up in LA, and I ended up in LA, and a bunch of bad stuff happened when I first got here, which everyone I know, you moved to LA from DC, right?
Yeah.
Did a whole bunch of bad stuff happen to you when you moved here?
Absolutely.
There's not one person I know who moved here who did, like, first year wasn't, like, horrific.
Right.
You know, it's like something really bad happens with your car, or your apartment gets broken into, or you can't find a job. It's just always a nightmare.
Right.
It's like how they weed people out, which they don't do well, by the way. It took me 45 minutes to get 6 miles. Yeah, so I had a whole bunch of bad stuff happen to me, like, dramatic bad stuff. And I needed a job, and something just told me to go to the Laugh Factory and get a job. Like, I was like, oh, I want to get into comedy here. Like, I loved stand-up, and I was like, I'm going to get into comedy here. So, let me tell you something. Getting a waitressing job at the Laugh Factory is one of the hardest things to get, because it's one of the only jobs in LA where it's just cocktail, which is, like, great. It's 7 to 10 or 7 to, you know, to 1 or whatever on the weekends. But, like, you can make a good living working minimal hours.
Wow.
And you have to, like, they really want you to be a certain height because of the comics and whatever. And I was, like, tall and didn't know anyone. And it was a total fluke. I should never have gotten that job. I had, like, barely any serving experience. But I got the job, and I worked there, and I met all these comics, and I loved them all, and I was just infatuated with them, and I would follow them around and became friends with them, and, like, memorized all their acts, and, you know, I just loved them. And then every job I had subsequently from then came out of there.
Wow.
So I worked as an assistant to a big celebrity comedian, and then I booked a really big comedy show in LA, and then I worked at a couple comedy management companies, and then I worked at finally my last job was in an agency for stand-up comics.
Wow.
And, and then I worked there for, like, the first 6 years I was doing stand-up, and then I left and started doing stand-up full-time.
Now, what was your very first stand-up performance?
My first one was in Florida when I was, like, 19.
Okay.
When I was visiting a friend from college. And then I did it a couple of times later that year when I was like 20 in Boston at the Hong Kong. And then I didn't do it again for 7 years.
Okay. Now, did you just show up in Florida and say,
It was just an open mic. Yeah, it was
okay.
an open mic. I went down to visit my girlfriend. You know, I think I'd started dating that guy,
okay.
Alex, and from UMass, and he was like, you should be a stand-up, you should be a stand-up. So when I went there to visit her, I was like, I'm not in Boston, like there's nothing to be afraid of, let me just go do this open mic. We wrote my stand-up set in one day and did it. I mean, it must have been horrible. It must have been horrible. But I did it.
When you came to Los Angeles, like what was your first time doing it here in LA?
I did, I stopped drinking, and like a few months after I stopped drinking, you know, you get kind of restless. You're like, all right, I'm like aware 24/7 of what's going on. Like, you know, time starts to go slower.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you stop drinking and doing drugs and stuff. So I was like, gotta do something, you know, and so I decided to try stand-up again. You know, I think when you quit doing something that's like controlling your life, you get a level of confidence just by quitting, because you're like, if I can kick that, even for this amount of time,
right,
you know, I should be able to do other things. Like, it gave me a little bit of balls, you know, it gave me some self-esteem. So I was dating a guy who knew somebody who ran this open mic at a place called Karma. And I did it, and, you know, I had been the funny girl in the office for, like, so many years that, like, when I told people I was going to be doing stand-up, it was, like, 80 people showed up to this coffee house that didn't hold that much. I mean, it was absolutely packed. And I did it, and I'm sure it was awful, but I did great because I had all these supportive friends in the audience.
Did you fall in love with it at that moment, or did that come later?
I don't know that I ever fell in love with it. I got addicted to it.
Okay.
You know, I feared it. I still fear it less, but it was more like I realized that it filled a hole that I was trying to fill with other things.
Right.
It just gave me confidence. It gave me my own thing. It gave me something I was doing, you know. So I did. The first 2 years I was in stand-up, I literally did a show every like 4 months. You know, it wasn't like I was hitting the,
right,
you know. And then at my second year, I started from like, you know, that point on, I just was like full steam ahead. I think, you know, when it changed for me, it wasn't like I fell in love with it as much as if I was like, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to do this.
Right.
So give it a real try. Yeah, I feel like I got addicted to the fulfillment that I got from it.
Cool.
Which I probably still am. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to love because it's so out of your control.
Right.
Like, I don't know, I feel like the times that I've been like, I love stand-up, I just keep getting my heart broken.
Right.
You know, because you don't know, like, there's the industry side, and then there's even the performing side where you, like, you know, you have these string of bad sets where you can't connect with the audience, and then if you're too in love with it, it starts to dictate how you feel about yourself.
Right.
And I'm not completely out of that, but I at least recognize that, like, I need to have a healthy attitude towards stand-up. And while it is one of the only things that I've found that immediately fills me in a way that other things can't. I mean, it's instant gratification. Whether the gratification is, like, positive or negative is, you know. But it's this instant thing where, like, I like having that aspect to my life.
Right.
But I've had to open up other creative avenues in order to stay sane, because I'm not one of these people in stand-up who everything they touches turns to gold. Right. There's certain stand-ups, like, and it really isn't about talent. I mean, it's what I used to think that people's successes in stand-up comedy had to do with, like, oh, they are funny. They are funnier than me. They are funnier than that. And what I've learned is that stand-up comedy is a business just like anything else. And if you have the right kind of material, the right kind of look, you're the right kind of ethnicity or gender or whatever, regardless of what you're saying, you will end up getting a lot of success.
Right.
And then there's comics who are, like, absolutely, like, gut-bustingly funny, who are just, you know, not that likable, you know, or they can't act, or they're just another white guy, you know. I mean, there's so much unbelievable talent in Los Angeles, and forget about New York, but like just in Los Angeles alone, there's, you know, I could give you a list of 25 comics that blow my mind.
Yeah.
You know, but there just isn't, not all of those people can have the same level of success.
Right.
And so they'll take the guy that it's like, okay, your material's not that great, but you're young and you're marketable and you're so MTV, and here you go. And
Right.
I have certain disadvantages for starting out as late in the game as I did,
Okay.
because most people start stand-up like 5 or 6 years younger than when I started.
Okay.
1, 2, I'm a woman, so there's some advantages to that, but there are some disadvantages to that. I'm white, which is, again, advantages, disadvantages. I'm Jewish, but I'm not, that's not my thing. You know, it's like, what makes me special? I don't know that I can really answer that. I'm just doing what I think is funny and expressing myself, and I know that I get a good reaction from people in the audience, and that may not mean that I will ever have anything the industry wants to sell. And that has to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, so I have to kind of look at other, and I think there's, I mean, percentage-wise, there has to be a large percentage of comics in LA who feel the same way I do and are in the same boat.
Well, now, and you were saying that you started looking at other avenues. So you did improv for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
Improv was great. It was a great skill. I find it very useful in my stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very useful for auditioning and for confidence.
Yeah. Why'd you get into it?
For those reasons.
Yeah.
I thought it would help. And I also wanted to open up my resume for other things. I mean, just being a stand-up is, it's like just being an improviser.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, you can certainly box yourself into that, and you could be busy every night of the week in that box.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not enough.
Yeah.
You know, unless you happen to get, like, very lucky.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so if you think about all the people who are just improvisers,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of the improvisers who have made a living just being improvisers, there's like 10. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I was packed every night of the week with all these different teams, and I mean, it's like, you know, it really can't be the only thing that you do. So I did it to sort of like layer my resume,
Mm-hmm.
you know, also to get another skill, so I would have more depth, and it helped me on auditions. I thought it would help me on auditions, help me with confidence, it helped me to be less afraid of the audience.
Yeah.
It taught me to listen.
Yeah.
So it was great. It
Yeah.
was great, and if money wasn't an issue, I would still be studying improv, because I think it's one of those things that you just continually get better and better. You don't. It's not like, oh, I took these classes and now I know how to do improv.
So now, and then you also got into writing, and you actually write for Life and Style magazine?
I did. That
You did,
actually
okay.
ended like 6 months ago,
Okay.
6 or 7 months ago. They stopped doing that section.
Oh.
So.
Tell me how you got into writing.
Well, the Life and Style thing is really just jokes. You know, you're just doing joke commentary. So, I mean, I already wrote jokes for stand-up, but I got a lucky break because a girlfriend of mine knew, she was getting sent these pictures because she knew the guy who was the editor. And so she's like, want to do this? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I was so hungry to do anything.
Right.
So I just started doing it, and they really liked my stuff, so I got in, like, pretty much every week for, like, 4 years.
Wow.
I wrote some articles for Girls Gone Wild magazine, which, yes, they have a magazine, which was fun.
You did have a series on YouTube called It's Just Sex. Is that still going on, and how did that come about?
Yes, no it isn't. I took it down, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I got that going because, you know, my stand-up is very sex-based. It's very based upon, like, talking about a lot of sex issues that people don't like to talk about, I guess, or do talk about, but not enough that it's like, you know, it's still shocking,
Right.
which is like, you know, I get kind of labeled as this, like, shock comic, and it's like, dude, if this is shocking you, you're not having the right conversations with your friends. Like, are you kidding me? But, so I wanted, you know, I was having a conversation with my friend Christian, who was a comic, and he's more of a producer now, and he said, you know, God, you have no problem talking about sex. Any subject I throw at you, you will give me an honest, you know, answer and not even flinch. And he's like, I think that's kind of special.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why don't you do a video blog where you attack different sex subjects and give your opinions on them? And, you know, I fought it at first a little bit. I was like, well, I mean, who cares what I think? I'm just a girl. I don't think I had any groundbreaking insight.
Right.
But he's like, no, that's what people are going to like, is that you're not a doctor. You're not, you're just a relatable girl who's had relationships and had sex and is comfortable talking about it.
Right.
So I trusted him, and we first started doing it as we wanted to do like it as a series for like a web series, like where I did like interviews.
Right.
About, interviews comics about sex. I was really green when we shot those. We shot like 10 episodes. I was really green, and it just wasn't. It wasn't a good format for the web, and I wasn't comfortable with it. I wasn't comfortable enough as a host. Like, I just wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
But we shot them and we put them up online. But then we started doing the individual video blogs, and those took off because. Yeah. One, it's like I'm talking about, I have penises in my tag. You know what I mean? So it's like automatically people are going to be like, what's this? They see my face, they see a girl, and it says penises, and they're like, oh, okay. So it got a ton of views. Mm-hmm. But it didn't just get views. I mean, I started to build this like really pretty, for me it seemed gigantic fan base. Maybe it isn't in the big scheme of things, but I had never managed a fan base.
Right.
So I wanted the videos to be interactive, and I kind of feel like I kind of assumed I would have like 10 to 15 people commenting on them, and I would comment back and maybe do an answer video or whatever, and it just became like pages and pages and pages of comments. And YouTube is a mixture of, there are some people who sincerely are like, yeah, thumbs up, this is great, or ask a question. But I'd say 60% of it is people being like, you're a fucking whore, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. So you have to sift through all of that shit, and then people comment on those people comment, like, either they agree or disagree, and then it just gets into this whole thing, and it's like, it's drama. Right. Like, YouTube is drama, and it started to really kind of affect me. I was like, number one, I can't keep up with all of these comments and getting back to people, which was my initial want. And two, I'm really kind of, I would wake up in the morning, like at like 9. I'd be at my computer at like 9. By noon, I would like come to and realize like I had only been through getting through and answering like one video's comments. I was like, I can't do this. This is overwhelming. Right. And I don't know where to like, what to answer, what not to answer, and so I just gave up on getting back to people. And then for a while, I only got back to the people who attacked me. Because... which is the worst thing you could possibly do, to ignore those people. And so I would get into these arguments with these men and realize that, like, they're not going to have their dreams or their fantasies crashed by some girl they don't know who has a YouTube channel, you know. But I tried. Anyway, my videos were getting a lot of hits, and I should have been partnered, because that's, really after you get, like, a certain amount of hits on a certain amount of videos, they usually automatically partner you. Yeah. And I had like 10 times that, and they would have partnered me, and like I submitted like probably like 4 or 5 times, and then finally they were like, we're not going to partner you because your material isn't family friendly, which is a load of crap, because there was people who were much like me who were partnered, and I don't know what their reasons were. Maybe their reasons were, at the time, MySpace had just been bought, and I think YouTube was really taking off, and maybe sort of thought that they wanted to, like, hone in and, like, go in a different direction, and I came at the wrong time, and they were like, no, we're not doing those people. But the way I took it was, oh, okay, this is exactly what I'm fighting against. Like, I am not going to put my content on a site that is the antithesis of what I'm trying to fight against, which is people who are, shut things down because it's not Christian. Right. Shut things down because they misinterpret it as, like, gratuitous or whatever. Right. I am not a girl sitting on the internet showing my boobs. I'm not even a girl on the internet being like, like, I am a person talking into a camera, matter-of-factly about sexual topics. Like, what is threatening about that? Right. So I just got angry and I stopped putting up videos. So I left the videos that I had done up, but then I stopped making new content, and I got bombarded with, where are you? New videos, how are we gonna, and then they started finding me on Facebook when I wouldn't return them on YouTube, and they were like, you know, we want new videos, we want new videos, we want new videos. And like part of me was like really annoyed, and then the other part of me was like, oh my god, like this is so cool. I made like real fans. But it didn't change my thoughts on it.
Right.
Eventually, what I would like to do, you know, ideally if I had my way in this world, I mean, I would love to do like an edgier Sex in the City as a scripted, you know, where it's like 4 girls, where we really talk about what 4 girls talk about.
Now, you just got back from Denmark with...
I was in Denmark this past fall.
Okay.
With a couple of comics who I love, Jason Rouse, Chris Naff. And it was you know, Jason Rouse is a very edgy comic, and he's got a huge following in Denmark. And so it was like a dream to work with him because I'm an edgy chick. And they don't have, like, they have comics in Denmark, but they don't have a lot of girl comics. So to see a new girl come and, like, you know, be dirty and stuff, I think they, you know, it was just a really great response.
Awesome.
And so I had a really great time. It was awesome.
You've done it in Denmark, in Canada.
Canada, yep.
America. Like, what differences do you notice in audiences?
You know, actually the most difference from what I've seen is within our own country. Our country is so ununified when it comes to, you know, I guess maybe because we're the melting pot, I don't know, but I would equate the Dutch to maybe being like Middle America. I mean, I don't mean but I just mean like they're very like, we've seen this, we've been here, you know, whatever. Middle America isn't really like that. They're easier to make laugh, but they're judgmental when it comes to sex. So for me, but you know, Canadians are very open-minded. They're very blue-collar. They like sex. They like drinking. You know, so it's for me, it's great. Yeah. And then Denmark, you know, might have been who I was working with, but I mean, they were like, they've got no hang-ups. Awesome. They have no sexual hang-ups. And so they were just great. I mean, it was great, and they all speak English, and it was great. But it's funny, in Denmark, you never got, one thing is, like, you never got rolling laughter, like you get here, like, you can get momentum on stage, and you really feel like you're with it. Yeah. They sit quietly, and then when they like something, they don't laugh, they clap. So you're going through, like, you know, 7 to 10 applause breaks during the set, and it's like, you know, it's weird, because you're like, are they liking it? Oh, okay, they just applauded, okay. So it's a little bit of a different energy exchange.
Right. And what's your favorite club you've ever played?
I love the Punchline in San Francisco. I love that room.
Why?
It's small. It seats 150 people. Most stand-up clubs seat 300, 350. That's the standard. So Punchline is small. It sits 150. I really like that. And when there's a lot of people in there, it just feels like good and intimate. I love the Funny Bone in Des Moines. Okay. Even though the booker or the owner, she kind of likes clean comedy. She's been very good to me, but she likes clean comedy, but the audience doesn't. So it's a smaller room too. I don't know what they seat. They might seat 300, but it just, the way it is, it feels intimate. Right. And I just like the setup of it. I just did stand-up live in Phoenix, which was phenomenal. But it was phenomenal because I was working with this headliner, Steve Ranazizi, who's on a show called The League on FX, and he's building this like really great following. There's a lot of people who love the show. So this club holds 650 people, which is insane for a club. It's like a small theater. He almost sold out like a couple of those shows. So to go out into a club, and his audience really liked me, so to go into a club where there's 500 people who all love you, it's like, it's amazing. But, you know, so I found a new fondness for stand-up live. So I think those would probably be my 3 favorites.
What's been your best experience on stage?
The best set I ever had was at the Ontario Improv on a show called The Dirty Show. Okay. Which, they pack it. It's like 300 people. They pack it. People who love dirty comedy. So it's like a fucking dream. I mean, I can go up there and say whatever I want, whatever I can creatively express myself. with no, like, maybe I shouldn't say that, is that wrong? I mean, just completely creative freedom. And that feels amazing. It's like an orgasm. It feels great. So that was probably my best. I mean, I've had a good amount of like really good sets, but to me that stands out. It was one of those sets that I was like, oh my god, is this really happening? Oh my god.
Okay, so what is the worst experience you've ever had on stage?
I've had quite a few of those. You know, after a while, when you do stand-up, because I think people are a lot of, like, who want to do stand-up or thinking about it, are afraid of bombing, you know, which is an understandable thing. What those people don't understand is, like, once you get into the comedy world, you become friends with other comics, and you realize that that's very, you have tons of support,
Right.
for the most part, you know, in the beginning stages of your stand-up, where it's like, if you bomb, it's like nobody is like, she's bad. Like, people, you know, you get support. But then as you go on with your career, there's different levels. Like, you'll do a show that's booked with not your clique of comics. So all of a sudden you're being you're debuting, you're sat in front of these other comics who don't know who you are. And so the pressure, like, if you bomb, it's like so humiliating because they don't know that you actually can be good. And then what other comics think becomes, like, more important than what the audience thinks. It's just a weird mindfuck. But the worst experience, I have two that stand out.
Okay.
The first one was, I did Comedy Time, and I'm sorry to say this about Comedy Time, because, you know, they're lovely people that work there and everything. There's nothing to do with them.
Right.
But Comedy Time is basically a online content company. They have their own website that has, like, content, like a Funny or Die almost,
Yeah.
but they control their content, so it's not user uploaded content. They have their own original content, but what they do is they, every Wednesday, they tape at the Ice House. They tape, like, you know, 6 or 7 comics doing 7-minute sets, clean. And then they take that tape and they upload it to their site, and then, you know, they own the content of that. So when I did it, when I did Comedy Time, I was like 2.5 years into stand-up. You get into, like, different levels, or like sophomore levels, where it's like you're unsure of your set, and then you start to do well, and you start to really polish the set that you have, and then you start to get validation, and then you perfect that set for that level, and then all of a sudden you get an ego. Because you're like, boom, who's killing on every show? Right. This guy, you know? So I was at a point where I had, like, 12 killer minutes. Now, by the way, I'll tell you right now, those 12 minutes no longer work. Even if I were to do them, it's very weird. You outgrow your material.
Yeah.
It's not even mental. It's like, all of a sudden, your tried and true jokes aren't working anymore. And it's a very sad day when that happens, because you're like, oh my god, I have to, like, get off the tee, you know?
Right.
But so was at a height. I was at, like, an apex of, like, I have these 12 killer minutes. I'm killing on every show I go at. Like, I'm, like, fucking, this is it, man. So I wanted to do Comedy Time. The guy who books it was like, you're kind of dirty. And I was like, I can do 7 minutes where I don't swear or say pussy, or I can replace pussy with vagina. Like, I can do things. I really wanted to do it. For me, I didn't have any, like, markers of, like, I don't know, in retrospect it was really stupid. And I kind of knew I was making a mistake. But anyway, so I went to tape, and they pack it out. You know, it's great. And the Ice House is a great room.
Yeah.
They pack it out, and nobody bombs at the Ice House. No one. It doesn't happen. It's one of the easiest rooms in the country. I mean, everybody will tell you that. It's just, for some reason, people just want to laugh there. It's like drunk Mexicans. They're great to perform in front of. I've never known of anyone who had a bad set at the Ice House. I got up, I was first, and my opening joke they didn't get it. It just flatlined. And I was too early on into stand-up to be able to recalibrate and be like, okay, well, maybe that didn't work, but I can get them back, or maybe they'll be able to use some of this set or whatever. I mean, it just threw me. Threw me completely. Like, I was like, you know, and at that time in my career too, I was very like, or at that time in my set, it was very much like, here's my setup, here's my punchline, you know? So it was very much like if they didn't laugh, I was really on alert.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know, I delivered my punchline, nothing, and I have camera on me, and I'm like, all I think is like, I'm the only person to ever bomb at the Ice House. I'm the only person to ever bomb at the Ice House. And I ended up having this, like, awful set, right? Mortified, got off stage, tail between my legs, like, just run away and cry. I don't even know if they paid me. I think I just left. And so then, like, 6 months later, and I knew they weren't going to do anything with the set because it was awful. I bombed.
Right.
Oh, no, what did I say? I came off stage and I apologized to the booker, and he was like, I told you weren't right for the show or something, and I was like, okay. And then, so 6 months later, I got my confidence back up. I didn't do stand-up for a month after that, so how mortified I was. I got my confidence back up. I recontacted the booker, and I was like, look, I want to do it again. He's like, we don't let people do it twice. And I was like, well, if you remember, my last set was horrid. You're not going to use it. It's nowhere on your site. You're not ever going to use it. So can I just do it again? Maybe there's something you can use. So we did it again. It was a pretty good set. Now, also in retrospect, it was the beginning of all the bits that I do now that are like really blown out and polished. So it was like way elementary, but it was a better set. You know, I had a better time. And they use that set, and they use it on their Comedy Time site, and they use it on their Chick Comedy site, and they use it on Hulu and Meta Cafe, and I mean, it is fucking everywhere. If you Google my name, that is the fucking first thing that comes up. It's everywhere. It's the only video anybody can find on me. It is, it's got like all these views because it's been up for a long time. Anytime a booker hires me, they don't ask me for video. They just go online, because this is what happens. They just go online, they find it. I'm 25 pounds heavier. I'm blonde. I don't have bangs. And my bits are, you know, an eighth of what. Same bits, but like not even nearly developed. It is the bane of my existence. If they said, give us $2,000 and we'll take it down, I would come up with the money. I want that thing fucking off the air. I hate it. It's awful. It is such a regret. It's such a regret. So, and anytime anyone meets me, they're like, oh my god, you don't look at anything. I thought you were fat and blonde.
Okay, so you said that this set, though, is like the start of your polished set now. Like, how do you write your sets?
You know, I can't really give you a good answer for that because I don't really know the answer to that. I think the process that I think I have actually doesn't work. Okay. I think when I try to do that and I bring it to the stage, it doesn't work. I think what ends up actually working is this. Maybe I start with one joke. Like sometimes I'll write like a great joke. Yeah. You know, like I just wrote this joke, and this is not like a killer, amazing joke, but it's a little bit hacky. It's been done before, but I think that if I follow, it's honest, and it's honest about my life. Like, you know, there's a lot of jokes out there that are like, oh, we've seen that before. That's hacky, blah blah blah. But you know what? If it's your truth, then it's your truth. Right. And you know, look, you'll try it. If it doesn't do well because the audience agrees it's hacky, then the audience agrees it's hacky. But like, you know, I just got out of a relationship, and I've been talking about on stage that, you know, we didn't have, there was a bunch of things that you should have in a relationship that we didn't have, and we ended up being like kind of two warm bodies just sitting next to each other on the couch, simultaneously playing Angry Birds, or playing each other in Words with Friends. And it's like, if I wanted that kind of relationship, I would have gotten married. Right. You know, which is like, yeah, okay, we've heard that before, but that's actually exactly what was happening and exactly what was going through my mind. So if I can expand, and if I could talk more about that and get more personal, even though the setup joke is like, then I have a joke. So what I have done now is I've taken some of my like one-lineries and really gotten into it, rather than like when you first start out, it's like shave it down, shave it down, shave it down, where's the joke, where's the joke? Now that I'm more into it, it's like, no, tell me more about that. Yeah. We don't want to hear, you know, this one-liner joke that doesn't go anywhere. We want to know, what do you mean by that? Right. So then it starts out with that, which like grabs the audience, and then I get to like kind of riff, and then hopefully in the riff, I'll record the riff, and in the riff there's another point where people laugh, and I go, okay, and then I keep that. And so that's pretty much the process that works. The process that doesn't work, which is what I would tell you is my process, is I sit at my computer and I write a subject like, you know, trash cans. And then I write for a page about trash cans. And then I pull out, you know, some funny ideas out of that, and I take them to stage. And they end up being these, like, well-written punchline jokes that no one fucking cares about.
We're almost to the end, but the second camera gave out. So it looks a little funny, but she has some great things to say, so hang tough.
David Letterman's comedy booker, Eddie Brill, recently got fired, and he made the statement, I see a lot of female comics who, to please an audience, will act like a man. Do you think that's true, or what did you think of that statement when you heard it?
I mean, it's infuriating.
Yeah.
It's infuriating, and, you know, the truth is that the majority of people, especially the majority of people who work in comedy, don't like female stand-ups. And, you know, he's a male stand-up, and I don't expect him to understand a female stand-up. You know, I mean, maybe someone who wasn't a comic would have a more, because Eddie's a stand-up, but, like, if he, maybe if he wasn't a comic, he would have a more unbiased opinion. I don't know. But, look, there are bad female comics out there. There's more bad male comics. But because there's less females, the bad females stand out. Some of my favorite comics, local comics, are females. Like, last night I was at a show downtown. It's like this experimental workspace. With, you know, so there's a bunch of other comics just doing, like, a workout room. And I could have sat and watched, you know, a couple of these female comics do an hour of material just because they're so naturally funny and I'm so invested in them, whatever. Like, you know, I don't know particularly who he's referring to, but I do know that there's rarely Letterman showcases in LA. They started to have more in the last couple of years, but, you know, my first 10 years in LA, I rarely heard of a Letterman showcase. And out of those Letterman showcases, rarely was there a woman on them. So my guess is that what he is referring to is the women that either he's being brought because those who the industry are pushing forward. And you know, the industry will push forward a comic because they booked a show. You know, they booked a television show, and then all of a sudden it's like, she's a stand-up, we're pushing her forward. And it's like, oh, but she's a great actress, but she's a fucking elementary stand-up. You know what I mean? But so I don't know who he's seeing, but I know he's probably out in the clubs in New York. So my guess is he's seeing up-and-coming female comics in New York.
Yeah.
I don't know, so, you know, I know of a few really great female stand-ups who are breaking the barriers of, like, you know, they'll talk about burping and farting, and they'll talk about, you know, sex stuff, and they'll do things on stage that aren't feminine and that aren't sexy. Right. And, you know, whether, you know, one thing that I've learned about comedy is if the audience is laughing, if the audience isn't laughing, it really means something. If the audience is laughing, it really doesn't mean anything. It's really weird. It's like, they better be laughing, but that doesn't mean that the person judging you is going to take that into account. However, they will take it into a lot of account if they're not laughing. Because there's something called not the right laughter, which is really great. So if you're getting the wrong laughter, like, you know, people who judge comedy will say, oh, well, if she's being shocking and talking about sex, that's not the right laughter.
Got it.
You know, which is like, okay, go fuck yourself. I don't know if he is uncomfortable, intimidated, turned off by women that are in stand-up, because it is not only is it a male-dominated field, but it's a masculine art form. Like I was talking about before, where it's like smoking and drinking and cocaine and late nights. I mean, women, if you're gonna like paint the picture of a feminine lifestyle, it's pastels and early mornings and fresh coffee and, you know, tea time and, you know, nice clothes and whatever. That's more of the feminine sensibilities. So while there's many men that may do interior design, it's a feminine profession. And that's how it is with stand-ups. So to say that a woman is trying to act like a man on stage is, to me, is a statement that he's told, like, it's a story he's told himself to justify not wanting to book women because he just doesn't think women are funny. Yeah. And that's okay. He doesn't have to think women are funny. But if that's the case, they need to have a co-booker who does. Right. You know, like, that's really how I feel about it. It's like, you know, if you're going to hold a job as a comedy booker, you know, you're going to have your own taste. You're a human. Mm-hmm. So, you know, maybe you're a booker who doesn't like female stand-ups. Maybe you're a booker who doesn't like male stand-ups. Maybe you're a booker who doesn't like gay stand-ups or political stand-ups or dirty stand-ups. I mean, everyone's going to have their own cup of tea. But, you know, you wouldn't be allowed to say, you know, I don't book black stand-ups because they're all trying to be white. Right. You know, you wouldn't be able to, you can't say that. Yeah. But in this society, you can still say a woman trying to be a man, that's not, you know, considered as offensive. Yeah. But it is as offensive. Yeah. It really is. And it's, I mean, rarely does a woman do Letterman. Yeah. So I get it. And I don't, you know, I don't think that a woman, you know, I don't know what particularly he's referring to, but my guess is that that a sexually empowered woman is acting like a man. I also think he's talking about, like, women who talk about, like, you know, I got an armpit smell, or, you know, right. my tits are sagging. Like, why it's okay for a guy to talk about his balls sagging, but a woman can't talk about her tits sagging. Like, that is a standard in comedy, right. Where it's like, you know, men can talk about their dicks and how, you know, how much they jerk off or how much they whatever, but, you know, if a woman says, just points to her pussy, all of a sudden she becomes a pussy comic. Right. So there's a bias. He's just, you know, another one of the industry people who feels that way. I think a good amount of people who work in the stand-up field feel exactly the same way he does. Yeah. It's something that's broken my heart over the years, and, you know, I'm glad he's not booking it anymore. You know, but they weren't upset enough to fire him. I mean, he's doing the warm-up, you know, but I think politically, which, you know, I'll hand it to Letterman. I mean, he didn't have to fire him. I think politically and image-wise, politically is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, Letterman at least had the desire to appear to be more gender neutral.
Right. Well, now, who are your comedy idols?
I mean, I love Brian Regan. He's my favorite stand-up to watch. I'll pay to watch him. I love him. He's not anything like me, stand-up-wise. He's very clean, and he does something that I can't do, and I'm just in awe of it. Yeah. I'll always watch him. It's weird. I'm around stand-up so much that, like, I don't have an accurate palette for, like, I mean, I could never be a booker either, which is why I think it's hard for comics to be bookers. If you are in the clubs too much, you're getting the wrong gauge of, like, what people want. Right. Because you get desensitized, and then all of a sudden you want weird, you know, it's like people who jerk off to vanilla porn for years and years and years, you know? Right. And then try to, like, it's like, then all of a sudden they want to push, you know, tranny porn or midget porn or scat or whatever, and it's because they're desensitized. You know, I don't know. Anyway, my point is, I love a lot of local people. Yeah. Like, there's people that I'll always go and watch. I love Eddie Pepitone. Love him. There's a girlfriend of mine named Sheila Ratner, who's, you know, she's a comic that I do a lot of shows with. Hilarious. Shannon Hatch, hilarious. Mary Patterson Broom, I could watch forever. It's hard for me to, you know, the thing is like, it's hard for me to idolize because I can't look at anyone's path. If I look at any other comic's path, and think that I can have anything that remotely looks like that, right. I will end up killing myself. So there has to be an entire, like, I'm treading a new path, and maybe we all are, I don't know, but my path doesn't fall in line with anybody else's, any of my forefathers. Right. So, and that's something I've had to accept, so it's hard for me to look at someone like a Louis C.K. as an idol, because naturally you're like, I want what he has. Well, he's a balding white guy who is non-threatening. Right. So I can't, I know I could never go in those footsteps. Right. I can't fit in them.
If you had some advice for young comics that are starting, what would you tell them?
First of all, I'm sorry. Really, like, I'm sorry. It's a horrible, awful life that will break your heart. That's my first thing. But I think my advice would be to round out your skill set as much as possible. I mean, while you're really, you don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none. So, and stand-up is one of those things that you really got to put full charge focus on. But as much as you can, keep, open other doors, acting, writing, improvising, other editing. Oh, you know what? I would say, I don't know, whatever, I would say, like, learn Photoshop. Because Photoshop is one of the most, I don't know it, I don't have it, and I pay a lot of money out because I don't know and I don't have it. But if you can get into graphic design, that's one of the best skills to have as a stand-up comic. You can make your own website, you can make your own merch, you can make your own flyers, you can, you can retouch your own headshots, so, which is also a creative skill to have. But I would just, don't have a fallback plan, because if you have a fallback plan, it's not going to, but just have, like, several different streams of income, if you will, and that could just be creative income, but I mean, like, streams of ways to, so if the stand-up's breaking your heart, which it absolutely will, many times over, know that everyone's been there, almost everybody, and be able to, like, dive into building websites, or dive into writing a script, or dive into other things, to not put all your eggs in one basket.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Come back next week. I'll be interviewing Robot Ninja Gay Guy's very own Travis Ritchie. You might know him as Inspector Spacetime on Community. And if you'd like more information on Danielle Stewart, her website is daniellestewart.com. She's performing February 25th at 8 and 10 p.m. at the Hollywood Improv. Tickets are available online. See you next week.